KDKR Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth. KYJC Commerce. KMWC Bethany. Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, real estate down to the basics. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Today, Mark Pfeiffer is going to be on the program to talk a little bit about the basics of real estate. How do you like that, Mark, going back to the basics? We haven't done that in a while.
We haven't, and I'm excited about it.
Well, let's talk a little real estate before we jump into some of the basics. You know, I saw an interesting statistic today. It was a graph, and it showed the enormous gap between sellers and buyers. And I don't think it was necessarily in the DFW area. I can't really recall exactly what area it was in. But I guess that we are seeing that, though, in the Dallas area. Or what are we seeing?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a really odd market. It has been. I know every time for the last 2 years we've come on, we've said that, or it's an interesting market, I think is the euphemism we use. But yeah, the gap, I mean, a lot of the headlines you're going to see is that, you know, there's more and more inventory. You know, buyers are more and more reluctant. It's, you know, factual that there's more cancellations out there where people get contracts and then cold feet for one reason or another. So there is a gap, but the part to just remember is that, you know, when they can do these comparisons, like, oh, the numbers are widening. With COVID, the numbers were so just crazy and distorted that, yes, there is a difference today between 2 years ago and 3 years ago. But the reality is, like, if you compare pre-COVID markets, we're still really good and normal compared to like 2018, 2019. So it's just this shift that's happening, and just the difference between this and the mortgage meltdown back in the 07-08 period. That was so sudden and abrupt. This is just this longer, more drawn-out process. So it's make it interesting. So, yes, there's a gap. I'd say Dallas-Fort Worth, we say over and over on this show, we're blessed to be here just because we are not like the rest of the country. And I still think we got a fairly, again, there's pockets where some are better than others, but we got a fairly good real estate market here in North Texas.
You know, it makes me wonder if we're seeing classic deflation. You know, that's kind of the way we've been over the past 10, 15 years, where we've had it kind of shift back and forth between classic inflation and deflation. But it's almost like that attitude of, well, I'm going to wait for the prices to fall a little bit further. And they're, buyers at one point were very anxious to get out there and buy, and now they're just like, I think we'll wait a little bit longer. I wonder if we're seeing those attributes right now.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was interesting because I know 2 years ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago, and you and I were chatting how at the time prices were up and interest rates were up, right? When rates were at 8% or whatever they were. And now rates have come down some, and prices are still going up. There's pockets. There's pockets, but when they're going down here in North Texas, Bob, they're 3% and 5% down. It's not the 30% that that scar tissue from the 2007, 2008 era. So I do think a lot of folks, and whether it's correct or incorrect to be determined, and that could be a matter of opinion, there are a lot of folks saying, man, I'm just going to wait till prices come down or till things, quote unquote, cool off. Again, you're just going to have to give me some better reasons besides that gut feel, because at the end of the day, we still got a lot of migration coming into North Texas, a lot of people buying. We still got people getting older. The millennials are still coming up to that age of buying homes. And so at the end of the day, like, there's still a demand. And economics 101, back to basics, like our show, when there's more people going to be buying, because you can say inventory back to 07 or 2017, 2018 levels. There are more people here in Dallas-Fort Worth than there were in 2017. So supply and demand tells me the prices are going to stay higher. And if rates come down, when rates come down, it's just going to charge the demand even more. So it's hard to know. But I'm just, we can debate that back and forth. But at the end of the day, time will tell who's right and who's wrong.
Sure. Well, talk a little bit about your first time home buyers. What kind of activity have you been seeing with that group of people?
Yeah, it's typically, let's use round numbers and call it a third of the market. It's a little bit less than that right now. It's probably more closer to the 1 out of 4 than 1 out of 3. And that is just because, like we just alluded to, is affordability is a problem. So they're still out there. I think there's this huge pent-up demand for people that want to buy. And what stops them is just taking that jump to either, one, doing it, to commit to whatever the monthly obligation is, and two, sometimes incorrectly, people assume it's the dollars out of pocket, because there are programs, believe it or not, still to this day, you can get in with $0 out of pocket. So those programs do exist, and I think a lot of folks still have that misconception that it takes 20% down, and it doesn't. I mean, so they're still out there. They're not as many. Again, now we're talking, a few percentage points is still a lot of people when you talk like the big picture numbers, but it's still, call it 1 out of every 3, 1 out of every 4 transactions. They're just now a little older and have a little more savings under their belt than what they used to 5-10 years ago.
So what's the on these houses that people are paying nothing to get into? What are the interest rate, the difference in interest rates in a normal real estate transaction?
Good question. So not I will quote something just because you asked the question, but just to understand again the compliance piece, right? There's a lot of factors that go into that. But if the rate's going to be X, let's go that direction. If you're quoting normal, air quotes there, normal rate for FHA or USDA or VA or whatever you want to pick, a lot of times the zero down program could be half point, full point higher in rate. There's always going to be that trade-off, right? You put less down, that's more risk. So you could see a half point to, let's just even call it 1.5 points higher in interest rate. But if you get to keep an extra 20 to 40 grand in your pocket, that translates to a lot of extra dry powder in the bank that you didn't have to part with for that extra payment.
And then this is a good entree into the subject of the basics. Talk about how private mortgage insurance works in that scenario.
Good question. So private mortgage insurance, also known as a bunch of different acronyms, right? Whether it's PMI, the private mortgage insurance, whether it's just MIP, just MI, mortgage insurance. I'll use that term just to encompass it. It's all fundamentally, it's the same thing fundamentally. It's the homeowner is actually going to pay a monthly insurance, but it protects the lender. So whenever somebody doesn't put down that 20% in a lot of cases, in a lot of different loan types, there's that extra piece each month that says, hey, here's a few bucks. And again, a few bucks is relative to how big the loan is. But it can be, a couple $100. It could be $100, right? It just depends on loan size and what you do. But it's there to protect the lender. So if somebody does default, meaning they get foreclosed on, they stop making payments, it helps make sure the lender gets made whole. And that insurance industry, the mortgage insurance industry, is there to make sure that they do collect these premium each month. And their bet is that they collect more premium than they have to pay out. It's like any other insurance, but it's there to help. It's where people can buy with zero down, or 3%, or 3.5%, or 5%, and don't have to put down that 20%. So people could say it's a bad thing. I think it's a wonderful thing, because without it, you'd have to put down 20%, and that would preclude a lot of folks from buying homes and having great opportunities.
So what do you have any idea of the percentage of people who are not putting 20% down? Like how you approximately break up the market?
I don't know the national average. I know mine, and I would hate to say that, because again, everybody's going to have a different. Here in North Texas, if you focus more on one rural part versus big city. So to answer the question, I do feel like it's call it half. I think nationally, the which blows my mind. Nationally, I want to say like over a third of the houses are paid for free and clear with cash. So if you figure of the ones that got mortgages, I'm going to tell you, I don't know that exact number, but going from the gut, I would say that it's going to be about 70% of folks, maybe 60 to 70% don't put down 20%. Put down less than 20% is probably a better way to say that.
See, that's just so interesting to me, because having been through 2008, you'd think those mortgages would just go by the wayside. But
Mm-hmm.
but I see they play an important role.
Well, again, without it, I mean, it's just you would so 60. It's the stats historically, which again 1 to 2% is a big number when you talk about the entire population of the United States.
Sure.
But typically, you'll see home ownership's about 60 to 64% of the population. So if you figure you guys, and again, that's I assume the adult population, 18 and up. Well, a lot of 18 and 19-year-olds don't buy homes. Right, and a lot of other folks that are, on the other end of the spectrum, maybe living somewhere with assisted living or something. But as a whole, 6 out of 10 folks are sitting there being homeowners. And the reality is, if you said that you had to have that 20%, man, that put a real kibosh on just the opportunity for the Americans.
Really
Anybody that bought a home 5 years ago in Dallas-Fort Worth is loving their home value today compared to 5 years ago.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it's the greatest way to, outside the stock market. One of the best ways to accumulate wealth is just by buying a home. And again, yes, can they go down? They can. But historically speaking, be there long enough. You got to live somewhere. You might as well, own the home to some degree. And I'm not saying it's for everybody, and I don't want to make that a blanket statement, but it is an awesome opportunity. Mortgage insurance is a good thing for sure.
That begs another question. I'm getting off course here, but that's the way it goes. If you bought a house 4 or 5 years ago and you've never had it checked for the true debt to value, what the equation is, to see if maybe that you got more than 20% value in your house. How do you go about doing that with the bank?
Good question. Great question. So the mortgage insurance depends on the program. So for loan program. So in other words, a conventional loan, if somebody has something, so what that means is just a loan that's not an FHA or not VA or not USDA. So a non-government type loan, which is anything out there that I just mentioned, and you think you might be close to that 20% equity position, absolutely reach out to your mortgage servicer. That's the person or the company you write your check to every month, and just call them and say, hey, what do I do to get rid of this mortgage insurance? They will then send you something, and it'll have kind of here's what to do. And I would say be smart about it in the sense that, and again, reach out to somebody you trust in the mortgage or real estate profession, right? Whether it's us or anybody else, and have them help fight that battle with you. Because Bob, I've seen it where folks, absolutely, it took 3 or 4 attempts for them to actually get their mortgage insurance canceled because they reach out to the servicer and say, hey, here's what I got. And they said, no, just kidding, you can't cancel it. And then they call me, and then we talk through it. And then finally on the 3rd or 4th phone call, I got on with them and help them get it canceled. So to answer your question, what should somebody do if they feel like they're close to getting it removed? Step 1, call your servicer and get whatever information they're going to, whoever you make your payments to, get whatever they send you. And 2, find somebody you trust in the business, whether it's a realtor, like a real estate professional, or a mortgage professional, and walk through it and try to get it, because it should not cost you any money, and that's your right to remove that if you've met all the criteria, for sure. And that's something. And that the second thing, which you didn't ask, but kind of like you joked earlier, like that's just the way it goes. Let's bunny trail for half a second. The other thing that folks forget, and I remember being young, having a number of investment properties, and it wasn't until years later that I realized, as your home gets more expensive in value, that's wonderful. But also realize it gets more expensive to rebuild a home. So check your homeowner's insurance.
Yeah, good point.
If you bought a home 5 years ago and you bought it for $300,000 and today it's worth $400,000, well, all of a sudden your insurance may not have enough coverage to rebuild the same $400,000 home because things just cost more today than they did 5 years ago. So make sure on a semi-regular basis that you are being proactive as a homeowner and checking with your insurance person to make sure you have enough coverage for everything. Because that's the other part that people just forget is good for you. Your home got more expensive. Make sure your coverage is adequate to rebuild that same home in today's dollars.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show, talking to Mark Pfeiffer about the basics. We're going back to the basics today. Of course, Mark, I got a long list of questions. We're not even remotely put a dent into it, so we may be doing basics part 2 the next time that you come on the program. But if you want more information about Mark, mortgagemark.com would be where you go. Let's talk a little bit about the different types of mortgages, and I'll have to admit that this even confuses me. I mean, because it just seems like there's so many different types of mortgages, and which one is appropriate for you? I mean, talk about how all that works.
Yeah, so let's just qualify what the two big buckets coming out of the gate. So we either turn left or we turn right. Is just government and non-government. So the government buckets are going to be those buzzwords like VA. So if you're a veteran, of course, FHA. A lot of folks think that's exclusive to first-time home buyers. It's not. Anybody can get an FHA loan that qualifies for it and that meets the criteria. And then USDA, and that's typically for rural properties. So not necessarily the heart of Dallas. But those are the three big main government programs. Everything else is what they call a conventional loan. That's the fancy buzzword in the mortgage business, but it's either government or non-government. And then each side of one of those, under the conventional side, you got the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. Those are good buzzwords. That's going to be the majority of those conventional loans. And then, after that, you got like jumbos. You got other buzzwords that are this, that, or the other. So that's at least what's out there. To determine what's right for you, certainly is not going to be something that's going to get answered in a single quick answer on a radio show. But the reality is, it is figuring out to make sure you do have the right product and the right program. It's knowing what you want, what's important to you. Do you want to put more money down? Not like have those answers at least ahead of time, or at least an idea of what you think you want, and then find a trusted mortgage professional to help walk you through those options and say, here's what is good and here's why. Here's what we looked at and here's why it's not, and just get educated. Because I think that is the part where you trust but verify. Trust somebody, but maybe do some homework on your own and find some resources to make sure that you are working with the right people that have your best interests at heart.
In the '08 crisis, the adjustable rate mortgages certainly did get people in trouble. Talk a little bit about that and if that is an appropriate choice for today.
Good question. So an adjustable rate mortgage is, if you ever hear the word ARM, it's technically an acronym, ARM, adjustable rate mortgage. And the alternative is a fixed rate mortgage. So a fixed rate's your generic 30-year fixed, and that's typically what you hear on the radio or see on TV for the rates. Like it's that 30-year. But an ARM is an adjustable rate mortgage, meaning there's some predetermined period, some starting period. Let's just take a 5-year ARM for an example here, where the first 5 years in my example, the rate's going to be known. After that, the rate's going to adjust, whether it be every 6 months or every year. It'll adjust based on just what the market's doing. ARMs have not been of any real value as of late, and that's going to have to do more just with the economics and how yield curves and all kinds of fancy buzzwords work out. But in '08, the real problem was they weren't just ARMs, they were 2-year ARMs. They were called like 228s. So it was like the 2-year ARM was, one, not often disclosed properly, or at least made very aware, and two, it would have prepayment penalties or these massive adjustments. So in terms of the '08, if somebody says, man, I don't want an ARM because that was bad back then, similar in structure, but certainly very different in terms of how they were used. Back then, I feel like in the '08 Wild West days, that it was just a different type of selling. The consumer was different. Just their mentality was always, how much could I afford versus today. I think customers are very educated and understand they come tell us, the mortgage professionals, what they can afford or what they want to spend. So again, I think ARMs do have a right place, right time. I don't see a lot of them in today's market. I don't think they're bad, but I certainly think that they should at least be approached with eyes wide open and make sure that you have the proper education and why an ARM might be right for you, because there are situations where it can work for sure.
Okay, so you get a mortgage, you get everything taken care of. How does that ultimately affect your credit score?
Good question. So the perfect credit model, at least in the eyes of a mortgage company, perfect credit model is going to have a car, a house, and 3 credit cards. That doesn't mean that's what you have to have, but that's just what it is. As far as getting the mortgage itself, it's a trade line. Pay your bills on time, it'll help you. If you miss a payment, it'll hurt you. So it's fundamentally, it's like it's any other trade line. Credit cards, if you hear folks say, man, I don't want to get my credit pulled, it's typically for the what's called revolving debts, the debts that can go up or down like credit cards. Car loans, student loans, house loans, those things are in a different category because those are big ticket items. They're set payments, with the exception of the ARMs, but they're more just the big ticket items, and not a lot of folks have the ability to just write a check to buy a house or to buy a car or to pay for their, student education. So the signs of the credit cards, pulling, getting Discover or something like that to pull your credit, that'll hurt you because that seems a sign of distress. But in terms of getting a mortgage, it'll help you if you pay your bills on time. Like anything else, if you don't, it won't. But at the end of the day, it's a good trade line. I consider that good debt. I think a mortgage is about the only kind of debt that's good debt, but I think it's good debt for a mortgage.
So tell me this, what happens if you miss a mortgage payment?
So this is actually a great question. You think, if somebody listens like, well, of course it's bad. Well, it's not good. Let's start with that. But mortgages, they're actually, in most cases, mortgages are due on the 1st of the month, but they're not considered late until after the 15th. So that means you got 2 weeks, or essentially 2 weeks, the first part of the month, to make a mortgage payment. And if somebody says, man, I just forgot, and they make their payments on the 20th, it will not hurt their credit. And here's why. Credit reports report lates that are 30, 60, and 90 days late. Now, what will happen is if you routinely pay, not even routinely, just once, miss that 15th deadline I mentioned, and you pay it on the 16th or the 20th, there will be a late fee assessed. I don't know, call it $75 to $150, somewhere in that range. So there will be a penalty, a financial penalty for sure, but it won't go against the credit because it's not until you're 30 days late that the mortgage company or any creditor is going to report it to the credit bureaus. So certainly would encourage everyone to pay on time before any debt is due. But in the event that you miss it by a little bit, just know that unless it's 30 days late, it's not going to show up on the credit report.
I'll bet you, though, the calls get a little bit panicky when it goes beyond that 30-day period.
I wouldn't get close. And I got to tell you again, what I'm saying is just kind of the guidelines and truth. I wouldn't want to push it to day 29 and see what happens. And I wouldn't want to push it on day 30. So I would certainly say pay your bills best you can when you can. But just know that you got a little bit of that breathing room that says just when life happens, again, it does. I've missed a credit card payment because I was changing banks and the auto draft went to the wrong place. I mean, that can happen, but as long as it's addressed quickly, the idea is that they don't want to punish you for a long term just because of one innocent mistake. So fix it quickly would be my advice.
Okay, next question. What is an escrow account and how does it work? Good
question. So in a lot of mortgages, and again, depends on the mortgage program, et cetera, but I'd say a lot of mortgages, more than half is my guess, have what's called an escrow account. And all that is it's a piggy bank that the mortgage company holds on your behalf. So they get to keep the piggy bank. It's still your money, but every month, 1/12 of your homeowner's insurance and 1/12 of your property taxes get collected as part of your mortgage payment. So when you write a check to the mortgage company, the mortgage servicer, 1/12 of your taxes and 1/12 of your insurance is part of that number. And they put that money into your piggy bank. And the reason being, when those bills come due annually, they can reach into that piggy bank to pay those bills on your behalf. And the reason why mortgage companies like that, they know that the home gets paid for insurance. So if it burns down, they can get paid because the insurance is in effect. And then for the property taxes, the taxing authorities can jump in front of a mortgage company. So they like to make sure those taxes get paid. So it's a piggy bank. An escrow account is a piggy bank that it gets used, that the bank, the mortgage servicer controls, to then pay on your behalf, the homeowner's behalf, to pay for the insurance and taxes. It's a good thing and keeps life easy, in my opinion.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Mark, always great to have you on the program. Once again, mortgagemark.com is where you want to go for information. Good talking to you,
Bob,
Mark.
as always.
Take care. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I enjoy doing these back to basics because there's so often times we get we talk about so many different topics, and you get the question that comes up, well, what do I do if I just want to start the mortgage process? And so it's always good to revisit those areas, that information, and talk a little bit about it. Like I said on a little while ago, that's one of the things I love about Mark is that I will put a library full of questions together. And he barely even gets through 2 or 3 of them. He's got so much great information. So we'll probably talk a little bit about this next time. that we have him on, which will be next month. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.